One time, Emoji's class had an assignment due in physics. When the time came to hand them in, Emoji noticed one of her classmates hiding at the back of the room looking anxious. He obviously hadn't done the assignment, but when the teacher asked him why, he scratched his head and said, "Because the wind blew my textbook away!" Emoji's teacher looked angrily at the boy and said, "You telling me you didn't complete this assignment because the wind blew your 9-pound textbook away?" The whole class started laughing at him and he received an instant fail. The lesson there? Don't lie to your physics teacher about physics.
Pandora worked at a fruit and nut shop once, and she was a really hard-working employee. It was a great job, but the shop was full of cockroaches and moths, and there had been times when she found maggots in the snack packs. At the time, she had her nose pierced, and one day her boss came in from nowhere and told her to go outside. He took her aside and told her that her piercing was absolutely disgusting, and how dare she do that in his shop? He completely ignored her cockroach comments. She was crying, but he didn't care. He told her to go out and do some free sampling. Pandora had to go outside and offer people free chestnuts while bawling her eyes out. One day, Snoopy and her friend were at Walmart and walked to the kids section. They were just standing there when they heard someone coming up from behind them. When they turned around to see what was going on, they saw a kid about 15 or 16 years old run past them to the kids section screaming, "Minecraft!" The kid launched himself at the Minecraft display, knocking it over and sending stuff everywhere. Snoopy and her friend walked away, trying to keep themselves from laughing too hard.
Final Pomp's crush knew he liked her and decided to have a bit of fun. She told him she would only go out with him if he held water in his mouth for a whole school day. He got most of the way through the day until science class when he coughed and spat the water all over someone's homework. He thought his chances were lost, but then she whispered to him, "You get an A for effort," and passed him a Hershey's chocolate kiss. He thought she was super cool, but when she walked away, she did a dab without looking and accidentally punched a kid in the face. Ah, the crazy things we do for love.
Snoopy once went to an extreme length to impress a crush. Her dad owned a rabbit farm, and so one day Snoopy snuck in and she killed a rabbit. She then cut off its foot, attached it to a small chain, and presented it to her crush as a gift. When he asked what it was, she told him it was a lucky rabbit's foot that she had made all by herself. Her crush was horrified and called her an animal-killing bitch who doesn't deserve love. He threw the rabbit foot on the ground and he walked away, leaving Snoopy heartbroken. As payback, Snoopy left the rest of the dead rabbit in his front yard. Oh man, I'm so proud of you, Snoopy.
The worst first date experience Tolop ever had was when he was 13. He dressed up really nice and even took her out to Outback Steakhouse for dinner. The bad part was when she came with him, she was dressed in drag and even bathed in perfume after he told her he was allergic to that kind of thing. And yet, she used so much that Tolop went into an asthma attack in the middle of the parking lot. People took photos and video of it, including her, and then he went to the hospital for 3 days. Tolop also fractured a rib and tore 4 muscles that day. Now he has to wear a gas mask in public so he doesn't choke to death on perfumes. Thanks a lot, humanity.
One night, when Mikhailem was 7, he heard loud banging and moaning coming from his babysitter's bedroom. He told his babysitter that he heard him and his girlfriend having sex, but his babysitter quickly denied it. Instead, he told Mikhailem that his girlfriend had been followed into the bedroom by a lion. The loud banging he heard was them fighting the lion. His girlfriend moaned when she was clawed by the lion and that her wound was bleeding like crazy. Mikhailem ended up believing his babysitter's story for 4 years.
When Nixium was in junior high in the early 90s at the height of the satanic panic, he and his pals would play D&D in the school cafeteria for the 2 hours between when his dad dropped him off and when his classes started. The vice principal quickly put an end to that, banning D&D from the school. So instead, they started playing a card game called Talisman. In response, the vice principal instituted an unliteral ban on fantasy-related games and memorabilia. That ban included reading fantasy novels from the school's own library, unless it was specifically part of class curriculum. If the rule was violated, the punishment was usually Saturday detention. Nixium and his friends were frequently singled out for that punishment. Frequently.
When Pandora worked at her part-time job as a shelf stacker, she crouched down while stacking cat food on the lowest shelf. She turned when she felt like someone was watching her.
It was an old man, and he was standing behind her. He said, "You're ruining your legs for your future husband." Pandora then said,
"Well, I don't know about my future husband. I do know that my current husband likes my legs just fine."
With that, she turned and hurried away from the man so she could resume her job. That was the weirdest advice she had ever received.
Kyle genuinely thought that tornadoes were giant tomatoes falling out of the sky, along with a lot of regular-sized tomatoes because, you know, tomato rain. He probably thought this because one day he and his mom were driving through where a tornado had hit. When he asked what had happened, she said a tornado came through. He saw a bunch of red stuff on the ground, which he could only assume was ketchup for some reason.
Once I was at a bar and I was drinking a whole lot. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw a woman who had to be at least 6'11". She made eye contact with me and I used my finger to signal her to come over. And when she came over, I stood up in my stool and I kissed her. She stood there for a few seconds, looking me right in the eyes and said, "You're drunk, little man," and walked away. I'm not a short person, but that day I kind of felt like one.
When Emoji was very young, he lived in a house with his cousins and their son. His cousin was a very hyperactive child and had the tendency to take off his diaper and run around in the nude. One time, he stood in front of Emoji's mom and stared at her directly in the eyes with a blank expression on his face as he whipped out his wiener and peed all over the carpet. It wasn't funny at the time, but luckily they can laugh about it now.
One time, Tolop was out going for a drive when he got stuck at a red light. While he was stopped, a homeless guy came over to see if he wanted his windows washed. Tolop made a big X with his hands, but the homeless guy didn't take the hint. Instead, he dunked his wiper in soapy water and went to town on Tolop's window, making it squeaky clean. When he finished, Tolop figured he would come to the window and ask for money, but instead, this ballsy homeless guy leaned in through the window, reached right past Tolop and grabbed all the loose change from Tolop's coin train. He walked off without saying a word. One day, Emoji caught the morning train into town. His carriage was quiet and everything was normal until a teenage busker boarded. The busker started playing some loud electro dubstep music and asked for donations. No one in the carriage seemed interested except for a very conservative looking old Indian woman. Emoji watched the woman start bopping her head to the music. She eventually got so into it that she got down on the ground and started breakdancing. It was the strangest thing Emoji ever saw.
One day, when he was a freshman in high school, James Shark was in his physical education class with some friends. They were messing around because it was a free day, so they could do whatever they wanted. One of his friends noticed that someone had dropped a cup of hot chocolate on the floor and dared someone to lick it up. He went on to say that they would pay the person $2. Wanting attention, James Shark volunteered to be the licker. He hurried his ass to where the spill was, kneeled on the dirty gym floor, and licked it up. Although he never got the $2, he still got the attention he craved. James Shark is also grateful that he didn't get sick from licking the gym floor. Sarah Gamba dated a girl for about 3 months. That was until she told him that she had 6 other boyfriends. She explained that she needed to have sex twice a day, and that one guy simply couldn't perform that much. Of course, Sarah Gamba was not okay with sharing his girlfriend with 6 other guys and told her so. In response, his girlfriend said, "Fuck it, fine, I will find someone who can deal with it." After that, she ran away.
When Pandora was in 8th grade, she asked the teacher if she could be excused to use the bathroom. As soon as she walked in, she noticed a funny smell. But it wasn't the usual kind of funny smell you associate with bathrooms. It smelled nice, like pancakes. Sure enough, Pandora found a senior cooking pancakes on a portable electric skillet. Cooking in the bathroom was frowned upon at the school, so the senior offered Pandora free pancakes if she kept it to herself. Sure, the pancakes were probably soaked in urine and all kinds of bacteria from the location, but hey, free pancakes!
Melissa had a crush on this quiet, mysterious guy at her school. Wasn't as handsome as me, though. She tried talking to him a few times, but he hardly seemed to notice her. One night, she got really drunk with her friends and started complaining about him. Her friends suggested it would be a really good idea to drunk contact him on social media. Melissa, in her drunken haze, was like,
That's a great idea.
So she invited her crush to a Facebook event called Make Out With Me. Seeing him at school on Monday morning was, well, kind of awkward.
In the 9th grade, Froggy and one of her best friends were big fans of Doctor Who. Froggy had gotten into it because her friend watched it all the time with her parents. One night, while she was staying over, Froggy got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. She heard the Doctor Who theme song playing loud as hell down the hall in the parents' room. Needing to go into the parents' bedroom to get to the bathroom, she walked in, expecting them to be watching the episodes. Instead, she caught her friend's parents having intense sex in Doctor Who cosplay. Her mom screamed for the doctor to come in her. They saw Froggy right as she walked in, horrified. Needless to say, she now despises Doctor Who, and her friend stays at her house whenever they hang out. Her friend's parents were actually chill about Froggy catching them.
Before I started my YouTube channel or became a voice actress, I was a dog groomer. At the place I used to work, we used to have to charge $2 for credit or debit. All of our customers knew this, and we had a particular customer that came for years. One day she walked in to pick up her dog, and when she went to pay, she realized there was a $2 debit or credit fee. She was suddenly shocked and just confused, as if we'd never charged her this before. We assured her that we always charged $2 for credit or debit, and she began to bang her fists on the table, screaming about how unfair this was and that she demanded her dog back and she was never coming again. She swung the doors open, still screaming, and honestly, it scared the shit out of me. But 4 weeks later, she came back with her dog as if nothing ever happened.
One day, a new family moved into Captain Street. They had 2 kids, and they were nice enough. But shortly after they moved in, the family went overseas for 4 whole months. When they got back, it was February, and the parents went door to door with a strange request. They decided that since their kids missed Halloween, they would do their own trick-or-treating in February, with costumes, decorations, and everything. They gave each neighbor on the street some candy and told them to give it to their kids when they came trick-or-treating. Captain played along to help them out, but seeing 2 kids trick-or-treating on a random afternoon in February was a bit odd.
When Andy Mations was a kid, her parents found a pretty terrifying way to punish her. Whenever she would break the rules, like not finishing her homework or coming home after curfew, her parents would lock her in a closet underneath the staircase. And to top it off, they would tell her that there was a killer clown that lived in the closet called Laughing Jack. It was a pretty horrifying experience, but Andy Mations ended up being the most well-behaved kid in her neighborhood.
Spincess takes a public bus to school, so she's seen more than her fair share of weird stuff. Like one time when a crazy religious guy boarded the bus. Spincess and her friend were quietly doing their Spanish homework when the crazy man shouted, "Hello everyone, my name is Nimrod, and I was chosen by God to save y'all from the fiery pits of hell." After going on about the end times, he pointed to Spincess and her friend and shouted, "We must save these sinful children. The woman who marries me will be blessed by Christ himself. Do I have any takers?" Spincess and her friend put their homework away and awkwardly stared out the bus window, praying it would be their stop soon.
Having traveled to the Middle East some years prior to university, Sid picked up on a little bit of Arabic. He wasn't exactly fluent, but he knew enough to write and understand some common phrases and short sentences. So a few days before a final exam, he found a piece of fancy tinted paper, wrote out quick answers and hints in Arabic with colored inks and a fancy calligraphy pen, making the cheat sheet look like a piece of fancy artsy calligraphy. He affixed it to the back of his notebook, and after putting his notebook on the floor like everyone else, Sid looked at it when he needed to, being fairly confident he was the only person in the room who could read it. Even if anyone did see it, Sid thought they probably wouldn't be able to understand it and just assume it was some obscure edgy artwork. He ended up getting an A, as in a cheating asshole.
The worst nightmare that I have ever had is actually a recurring dream that I have had all throughout my life. The dream always starts the same. I'm in a forest, alone, wandering amongst the trees, when suddenly I would hear a noise somewhere nearby. I would look around, terrified, knowing what was about to come, as if sensing it, and suddenly it would happen. a massive brown bear would emerge from the brush nearby, charging right at me. I'd immediately turn and run as fast as I could, trying desperately to escape the bear, who would roar and sprint after me. I can't say why I've had this dream so many times throughout my life, as I don't really even consider bears to be that scary, but whenever I do have this dream, it always freaks me out.
This girl emoji told him to do something really weird in the bathroom. He really wanted to impress this girl, so the next day, he bought a cantaloupe and took it to the bathroom with him. Emoji started making grunting noises and then dropped it from about 4 or 5 feet in the air and into the toilet. It made a giant splash, and the toilet water got all over the floor. She ended up going out with him.
Pringle was babysitting a kid who was upset because Pringle was preparing to go home. Pringle was walking out the door. The kid asked for a hug, so he did. While he hugged the kid, he leaned in and whispered,
"If you ever leave me, I will make sure every person in the world, especially the ones you love, die a horrible death."
Once Doobie was taking a nice afternoon stroll around the neighborhood, she noticed a woman across the street looking at her, but she didn't think much about it. A few minutes later, the woman had crossed the road and was power walking to catch up to Doopy. When she caught her, she tapped Doopy on the shoulder and enthusiastically said, "You know, I think your hair would look wonderful on my wig stand." Doopy didn't even know what to say to that. She was sure it was meant to be an innocent comment, but the woman's enthusiasm and the fact that she crossed the street just to say that really creeped her out. What was the dumbest thing I believed as a kid? I remember when I was little, I thought it was only possible to have a baby once you were married to someone. I just didn't understand why, though. I had been to weddings. What was it about this wedding ritual that created a baby? They walk up the aisle, they say a couple words, there's a ring, they kiss. What was it? I remember I pondered on this mystery for many years, until I came to the conclusion it was the ring. The ring had some kind of power that made a baby. That was until I ran into a woman who had a kid, but she didn't have a husband. And now I was even more confused. Nothing made sense anymore. My ring theory, it was thrown out the window. But that was until I took sex ed in school, and then it all made sense because my parents didn't ever explain to me that you gotta do the with the to make the baby. Yeah.
When Kyle worked at a gun store in Indiana, he was cleaning some bolt-action guns when a man walked in. He looked around and asked Kyle if he could recommend him a handgun for self-defense. He said he'd never shot a gun before, so Kyle gave him the safety rules for firearms, such as treat every gun as if it's loaded. Kyle then took him to the range so he could practice. He decided to buy the gun and so removed the half-full magazine. He then attempted to shoot the empty weapon at the wall. They had removed their hearing protection, so all Kyle could hear was When you remove a magazine from a gun, there's still a bullet in the chamber. They keep that hole in the wall as a reminder to clear the chamber of every firearm.
When Sacred Snoopy was in 6th grade, there was a bully named Edward. He usually stole things from people, harassed girls, and started fights. One day, Sacred Snoopy and her class were in social studies, and her teacher was writing on the board. Edward was having an argument with another student about shoes because they were that important to him. So when the teacher was done with the useless arguing, she turned around and asked what was so important that they had to interrupt the lesson. Edward said that the other student couldn't afford shoes, and he needed to point that out. Then Sacred Snoopy's teacher said to him, "Well, you can't afford soap, but no one else is complaining." Sacred Snoopy is pretty sure she saw that kid dab, and everyone was pretty much screaming as her teacher turned around and continued with the lesson.
During a cold winter, James Shark and his friends were having a party. They were working on his new truck, which was almost finished. All they had left to do was put in the motor and fill the tank with gas. One of his friends came back from the gas station with a beer and a full gas can. His friends poured the gas into the tank, but spilled some on his arms. Once the gas was poured, James Shark and his friends went back to the house to drink some beer. After a while, the house began to get very cold, so his friend went to go check the stove. Before they were going out the door, James Shark said,
"Wait, you have gas on your arms. Try covering them with some cardboard to shield the fire."
His friend got a big piece of cardboard and went outside to check the stove. As soon as he opened the stove to take a look, poof! Flames burst out from the stove as though something exploded. The cardboard, along with his friend's arms, were on fire. James Shark ran into the house, filled a bucket with water, and threw it on his friend's arms, putting out the fire. In the end, everyone was laughing, except for James Shark, who felt bad for giving his friend that bad advice. My sister's kids are spoiled by my grandmother. When we're out with their mom, they act like perfect angels, but when grandma's around, they know they can manipulate her and not get in trouble. Every time we go to Walmart, they have to get something, and if they don't, they will kick and scream. Once, I remember going to Denny's for breakfast while visiting them in Florida, and my nephew spent the entire time trying to play underneath the table, even though we had to constantly tell him to stop. He would scream and be extremely loud and not listen, and he complained about his food and demanded I give him my eggs, even though he had his own. Eventually, I had to just give them to him because he wouldn't stop crying, and he didn't even eat them. By the end of the meal, everyone was emotionally drained from trying to get him to act right, and to top it off, as we were leaving the restaurant, I had to chase him around the parking lot because he wasn't listening to anybody, and, of course, wasn't looking out for cars. I still love him, but he's a handful. Hellbent's manager was extremely homophobic. One day, he called Hellbent into the back office. He handed Hellbent some cash and asked if he would take the boss's daughter out on a date. He was worried she might be a lesbian, so he asked Hellbent if he would do him the favor of fucking her. Hellbent took the money and went on the date. But as soon as he met the boss's daughter, he told her everything her scummy dad was up to. He said he had no intention of fucking her to make her straight, but they could still hang out for the night and enjoy a free dinner and a movie, courtesy of her homophobic dad. Sid and his dad went to a bookstore, and after a good deal of time, his dad found a book he wanted to buy. When they got to the checkout line, his dad leaned forward and started pointing out imaginary flaws in the book, angling for a discount. The girl behind the counter got this really confused look and looked at Sid for help. Sid put his face in his hands, as this went on for a while and his dad was starting to hold up the line. Sid was trying to avoid being associated with him, but was unfortunately standing right next to him. He kept pressuring the girl to lower the price for a whole sequence of nonsense, made-up reasons. Finally, Sid had enough and said,
"Dad, I work in retail, remember? This isn't the Grand Bazaar, you can't haggle prices at a retail store. Either buy the damn book or let's get out of here and stop wasting this poor lady's time."
He scowled at Sid and begrudgingly paid for the book.
Pandora and one of her friends were sitting at McDonald's when a fat man walked in and yelled, "These aren't organic! Give me organic fries!" While Pandora and her friend were laughing, the man walked up to them and asked them why they were laughing. Pandora pointed to her friend and answered, "She told me a funny joke." The man just got some new fries and walked out as though nothing happened.
Back in primary school, let me tell you what the most valuable commodity was. It was paper. Like if you're writing in your notebook and it gets full and you have to ask the teacher for some paper, they'll begrudgingly give you some. Sometimes they'll run out, but you know a kid who has some spare paper, like either hidden in his books or in his desk, or he knows where it is hidden in all the cabinets. Anyway, one time I saw this kid who was real desperate. He filled up his book and he was asking around, hey guys, you got any spare paper or anything like that? There's this one kid clearly withholding. Everyone knew this kid was like the mafia boss of paper. He always had some somewhere. What he would do is he would wait for the teacher to stash away some paper. He'd go in, take a whole bundle, not enough to be noticeable, and then hide it somewhere else in the room just in case. But anyway, these two kids started getting into a fight because they clearly were withholding and they needed the paper. And obviously they just didn't like each other, they just wanted an excuse to bash each other up, so they started going at it. So the teacher walks back in, what the fuck's going on? She tries to break them up. one of them kicks her in the knee. That's when shit gets real. The kids just stop. Just stop, like, oh god. Oh god, what have we done? The teacher just picks them up, is like, alright, detention, you're out. So their problem was they violated the golden rule, never fuck with the teacher. It also taught us all to bring our own paper from home, just in case. Yeah, our most valuable resources in school, paper and clumps of grass. You collected both of those, you were a rich man.